The uncomfortable truth. Why rejection is your secret weapon, and how to finally embrace it. Ever felt that sting of rejection? That knot in your stomach, the little voice whispering doubts in your ear, the sudden urge to curl up in a ball and disappear? Yeah, me too. We've all been there. Whether it's a job we didn't get, a relationship that fizzled out, or even just a friend who didn't text back, rejection is a universal human experience. It's that uncomfortable truth, that thing you've probably felt but haven't dared to fully admit. The rejection you try so hard to avoid isn't your enemy. It is your greatest ally. And no, I'm not trying to give you some fluffy, false motivation to soften the reality. Rejection hurts. It burns, it tears, but it also awakens. You see, the problem isn't rejection itself, but our reaction to it. We've been conditioned to see rejection as a failure, a sign that we're not good enough, smart enough, attractive enough. We build our lives around avoiding it, constructing elaborate defenses to protect our fragile egos from the slightest hint of disapproval. We say yes when we want to say no. We silence our opinions to avoid conflict, and we contort ourselves into shapes that feel utterly inauthentic, all in the hopes of winning someone else's approval. But what if I told you that this fear of rejection is holding you back from your true potential? What if I told you that embracing rejection, rather than running from it, is the key to unlocking a life of authenticity, confidence, and genuine connection? Because rejection doesn't speak about the other. It speaks about you, about everything inside of you that hasn't been resolved, that hasn't been faced. The mirror of rejection, seeing yourself in a new light. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to attract rejection like a magnet? They're constantly complaining about how they're always being overlooked, underestimated, or just plain disliked. And while there may be external factors at play, the truth is that they're often projecting an energy that invites rejection into their lives. Think about it. When you're constantly seeking external validation, you're essentially broadcasting a message to the world that says, "I'm not good enough on my own. I need you to tell me that I'm worthy." And that neediness, that desperation for approval, is a major turnoff. People can sense it, and it pushes them away. It's like that old saying, people love you more when you don't need them to love you. And while it may sound counterintuitive, there's a profound truth to it. When you're confident in your own worth, when you don't need someone else to validate your existence, you become magnetic. You project an energy of self-sufficiency and independence that is incredibly attractive. According to Carl Jung, everything that irritates us in others can lead us to a deep understanding of ourselves. So tell me, what aspect of you awakens that rejection? What inner shadow is being triggered? What insecurity manifests every time you feel rejected? Maybe it's a fear of failure, a belief that you're not capable of achieving your goals. Maybe it's a deep-seated insecurity about your appearance, a feeling that you're not attractive enough to be loved. Or maybe it's a fear of abandonment, a fear that you'll be left alone if you don't conform to other people's expectations. Whatever it is, that insecurity is the key. It's the thing that's holding you back from your true potential. And rejection is the mirror that reflects it back to you, forcing you to confront it head-on. The uncomfortable truth about neediness and why it repels. Let's get brutally honest for a moment. Neediness is a killer. It kills relationships, it kills opportunities, and it kills your self-esteem. The more you chase someone, the more you try to win their validation, the more they reject you. Why does this happen? Because the human mind despises neediness. It doesn't matter how good your intention is. It doesn't matter how sincere you are. If you emit desperation, you emit rejection. I remember a time when I was desperately trying to impress a potential client. I went above and beyond, showering them with attention, offering them discounts, and basically bending over backwards to meet their every need. And what did I get in return? Radio silence. They ghosted me. At first, I was confused. I had done everything right, hadn't I? I had been attentive, responsive, and accommodating. But then I realized that I had been too eager. I had come across as desperate for their business, and that desperation had repelled them. They could sense that I was more concerned with winning their approval than with providing them with real value. And that lack of authenticity had turned them off. Detachment is pure power, not because it makes you indifferent, but because it reveals a deeper truth. You are already enough. Accepting your shadow, the key to self-sufficiency. So, how do you get to this point of self-sufficiency? The answer is simple but uncomfortable. You must accept your shadow, that part of you that you hate, that you deny, that you hide. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the ability to integrate all your broken fragments into a whole being. Only when you achieve this do you free yourself from external judgment, because you understand something essential. No one has the power to truly reject you except yourself. Think of how many times you've betrayed yourself to gain an approval that never came. How many times did you adjust to what you thought others wanted, losing your essence along the way? And then, ironically, you were rejected for not being authentic, for pretending, for chasing what should never have mattered. I know this firsthand. I spent years trying to be someone I wasn't, trying to fit into a mold that wasn't meant for me. I suppressed my creativity, I stifled my opinions, and I pretended to be interested in things that bored me to tears, all in the hopes of being accepted by a certain group of people. But it never worked. The more I tried to conform, the more I felt like a fraud. And the more I felt like a fraud, the more insecure I became. I was constantly worried that someone would see through my facade and expose me for the phony I thought I was. It wasn't until I finally gave myself permission to be myself, to embrace my quirks and imperfections, that I started to feel truly free. I stopped trying to be someone else, and I started focusing on becoming the best version of myself. And that's when things started to change. People were drawn to my authenticity. They could sense that I was being genuine, and they responded to it. I stopped attracting superficial relationships, and I started attracting deep, meaningful connections. Real attraction is not manipulation or cheap reverse psychology. It is the pure manifestation of someone who has conquered their shadow, who has stopped needing external validation because they've chosen themselves unconditionally. Choosing yourself, the path to personal magnetism. The world is full of people trying to please, begging for attention, desperate for crumbs of affection. Do you want to stand out from the crowd? Stop looking, stop begging. Choose your own path, even if no one else understands it, even if it means temporary solitude. Because there lies the true power. There lies the mystery of personal magnetism. You're not alone because of weakness. You're alone by choice. And that choice transmits strength. It transmits courage. People perceive it, even if they don't fully understand it. That's true attraction, an attraction that doesn't depend on cheap tricks, but on having transcended the need to be approved. I remember a time when I was faced with a difficult decision. I could either take a safe, well-paying job that would make my parents happy, or I could pursue my passion, even though it meant financial uncertainty. Everyone told me to take the job. It was the practical, responsible thing to do. But my heart wasn't in it. I knew that if I took that job, I would be living a life that wasn't true to myself. So, I made the difficult decision to follow my passion. It was scary. There were times when I doubted myself, when I wondered if I had made the right choice. But I never regretted it, because by choosing myself, I had chosen a life of authenticity and purpose. I was no longer living for other people's expectations. I was living for myself. And that's when I started to feel truly alive. Rejection, far from sinking you, makes you stronger. Every no you receive is an opportunity to look deeply at yourself and ask, why do I need other people's acceptance so much? Why am I giving so much power to someone who doesn't even control their own life? Rejection awakens you. It forces you to be honest with yourself. It shows you what you haven't overcome yet. Every rejection is an uncomfortable mirror that reflects back to you with absolute clarity who you are and what you must face to grow. That's the uncomfortable part, but also the most powerful part of rejection. It doesn't lie. It shows you with absolute precision your weakness, but also your potential. Embracing no, a gateway to emotional freedom. So, listen carefully. Stop running away from rejection. Embrace every no as a door to your own emotional freedom. Accept every no as a sign that it's time to stop seeking external approval and start building your self-esteem from scratch. It's not easy, it's not quick, but it's the only authentic way to live. True attraction doesn't come when you become what others want, but when you become what you yourself need to be. True freedom, true strength lies in stopping depending on external opinions. Live according to your own criteria, even when no one understands it, because in the end, that's what truly attracts. Relentless authenticity, emotional independence, the mystery of one who knows how to be alone, but not because of loneliness, but because they've understood their worth. When you understand this, rejection loses power, and you finally regain it. Always remember this. Rejection is just the beginning of your true potential. The self-rejection epidemic, the darkest truth of all. And now comes the most intriguing part of all this. While you desperately seek external acceptance, you ignore the true rejection you are constantly facing, the rejection towards yourself. How many times have you ignored what you truly want to fit into a mold that isn't even yours? Think about it carefully. The greatest rejection isn't the one that comes from outside. It's the one that hides in the daily decisions you make out of fear of being left out of the circle, fear of being left behind. That's the most dangerous rejection because it's silent, subtle, and above all, self-inflicted. What's truly dark is not that someone tells you no, but that you tell yourself that every day that your own internal dialogue is harsher, cruder, and more ruthless than any external comment. There lies the root of the problem. You haven't learned to choose yourself first. I've seen this play out time and again in the lives of my friends and clients. They're so busy trying to please everyone else that they completely neglect their own needs and desires. They say yes when they want to say no. They compromise their values to avoid conflict, and they settle for less than they deserve, all in the name of external validation. And the saddest part is that they don't even realize they're doing it. They're so used to putting other people's needs first that they've lost touch with their own inner voice. They've become experts at self-rejection, constantly telling themselves that they're not good enough, not worthy enough, not deserving enough. Your shadow, the unacknowledged ruler of your life. Jung insisted that until you are aware of your own shadow, it will direct your life from the darkness. The shadow is not an enemy. It is the part of you that needs attention, acceptance, and reconciliation. If you deeply analyze your behavior, you will see clear patterns, failed relationships, similar uncomfortable situations that repeat, same conflicts that seem cyclical. This is not a coincidence. It's your shadow trying to make itself known. Every repetition is a message you constantly ignore, an inner call you prefer to silence. I used to have a recurring dream where I was trapped in a dark, maze-like house. I would wander through the corridors, desperately searching for an exit, but I could never find one. For years, I dismissed this dream as just a random collection of images. But then I started to learn about Jungian psychology, and I realized that the house was a metaphor for my own unconscious mind. The dark corridors represented the parts of myself that I was afraid to explore, the shadows that I was trying to keep hidden. And the fact that I could never find an exit meant that I was trapped in a cycle of self-rejection, constantly running away from the very things that I needed to confront in order to heal. Listening to rejection, unlocking your inner potential. And now I ask you, what would happen if instead of fighting against rejection, you stopped to listen to it? What would change in your life if you started facing what you fear to discover about yourself? This is where fascinating Jungian psychology comes in. To transform into a complete person, you must face your own inner chaos, your insecurities, your deepest fears. As long as you keep ignoring them, you will keep looking outside for what you will never find because outside there are only distorted mirrors. What you truly seek is not in others. It is buried within you, in those dark corners you never enter because you believe they are dangerous. And yes, they are, but only by facing that darkness do you discover the true potential of your personality. Only there will you find what you really are. The paradox is that the more you try to protect yourself from rejection, the more you reject yourself. Living without masks. The the key to genuine attraction. Want to know an uncomfortable truth? Most people live without knowing themselves, without discovering themselves, acting under layers and masks they accumulate out of fear of discovering something they won't like. But that is precisely the reason they never become truly attractive. They are copies, imitations, empty attempts to please, always manipulating to fit in, losing themselves in that absurd game that eventually destroys their essence. And here is the part that's hardest to accept. When you finally decide to face your shadows, when you finally welcome that dark side, you begin to live without fear of external rejection, because you realize that the most devastating rejection is the one that comes from yourself. And once you overcome that internal obstacle, no external rejection can truly hurt you. This is precisely what real detachment means. It's not indifference, it's not coldness, but the complete opposite. It's the deep understanding that your worth doesn't depend on external approval, that inner independence is magnetic because it's rare, because it's authentic. Everyone seeks approval. Very few approve of themselves. And when you achieve it, you automatically stand out from the crowd because the rest only reflect insecurity. The courage to be yourself, inspiring authenticity. Now I want you to think about all the people you deeply admire, the ones who seem to have an inexplicable magnetism. What do they have in common? They are people who chose themselves above external opinions. They are individuals who faced their shadow and decided to live by their own rules, not the imposed expectations. It is right there, in that act of personal courage and bravery, where their attraction lies. They don't seek validation. They simply are, and that's exactly why they attract effortlessly. Reverse psychology, therefore, is not a dirty trick or a manipulative technique. It is the natural manifestation of someone who has completely accepted themselves. They don't seek to be chased. They simply stop chasing themselves. And that genuine and profound indifference is what makes them magnetic individuals. The paradox is beautiful. The less you need acceptance, the more you get. The less you chase, the more you attract. The magic of self-acceptance, attracting what you deserve. Do you want to know the real magic behind all this? By stopping the search for validation, you allow life to flow towards you organically. You become someone who isn't defined by external circumstances, but by a deep connection with yourself. And when you reach that state, when you finally understand that rejection only hurts when you reject yourself, something unexpected happens. The world begins to seek you out because it detects something unique, something authentic, something that is too scarce today. It's like you've been searching for the key outside when in reality, you've always had it in your pocket. And now I want you to imagine something else. What would happen if today, right now, you decided to start choosing yourself for the first time in your life? If you left behind every fear, every expectation, every label imposed, if you decided to look at yourself in the mirror without filters, without prejudices, without seeking approval from anyone but your own eyes, I assure you that you would discover something amazing. Behind the rejection, behind the fear, lies your true essence, patiently waiting for you to recognize and accept it. So, listen carefully. Don't waste another minute begging for acceptance. Don't spend another second waiting for validation from those who don't even validate themselves. Learn to see rejection as a clear message, as a direct invitation for you to finally wake up and start living from your inner power. Because when you stop desperately needing external approval, something magical, almost inexplicable, happens. You begin to attract exactly what you need. The ultimate question, living without approval. And if you've made it this far, maybe you're ready to face the deepest question of all. What would you do if you knew for sure that you would never need anyone's approval again? What kind of life would you choose to live then? Because here's the final mystery I want to leave you with today. When you overcome the fear of rejection, you never go back. You never return to your previous state. Something changes definitively inside you. And in that instant, you understand what you've always suspected, that you never needed anyone else to be complete. You always were. You just had to remember it. Rejection, after all, is not a sentence. It is your great opportunity. Will you seize it now, or will you keep waiting for someone else to decide for you? Rejection is not just a door to self-knowledge. It's also a test of authenticity that few are willing to face. The mirror that never lies, the echo of your own truth. Here comes another uncomfortable truth that many prefer to ignore. When you are rejected, what really bothers you is not the other person's opinion. It's that opinion matching something you already think about yourself. Yes, what hurts the most isn't that someone tells you that you're not enough, but that deep down you believe the same thing. You're scared to face your own insecurity reflected in the eyes of others. There lies the open wound you must heal. And it's precisely at this point where the magic happens. Rejection becomes your great ally because it clearly illuminates what you need to work on in yourself. Without realizing it, each rejection is like a map pointing exactly to where the wound you need to heal is. Most prefer to hide, deny, lie to themselves because facing the truth always hurts. But that denial only prolongs the agony. Do you want the power that very few reach? Look directly at what you fear the most in yourself. Don't run. Don't look away. Face that dark part no one else knows, but that you recognize perfectly when you're alone in silence. Embracing vulnerability, the badge of courage. Now comes a fascinating paradox. We live in an era obsessed with pretending perfection, with hiding rejection and disguising it as success. Social media is full of smiling masks, filters, studied poses to hide the deep insecurity that lies behind those images. Have you ever wondered what would happen if instead of hiding your emotional scars, you embraced them publicly? What would happen if you dared to show the world that yes, you were rejected, that you felt afraid, that you doubted, but that despite all of this, you chose to move forward? Here's the perfect irony. The more you try to hide your vulnerability, the less authentic you seem. People can smell falseness from miles away. And what truly impacts them isn't perfection, but brutal authenticity, the one that dares to show wounds, scars, and lessons. So stop hiding rejection as if it were a shame, and start using it as a badge of courage. Because it is right there in your accepted weaknesses where your greatest strength arises. But let's be clear, I'm not talking about romanticizing rejection or falling into comfortable victimhood. It's not about becoming a martyr, but a conscious warrior. And here is the hidden power. When you admit that you can be rejected without that destroying who you are, you automatically level up emotionally. Do you know why? Because you learn life's greatest lesson. Your identity can never depend on external applause. Emotional dependency always leads to certain defeat. Beyond approval, the art of genuine connection. And be careful with this, because I'm not saying you should isolate yourself from the world and become an emotional hermit. On the contrary, it's about learning to connect with others from the strength of someone who no longer seeks approval, but genuine companionship. Have you noticed how the most authentic, the deepest relationships come when you're not desperately seeking them? That's the universal law few understand. When you stop chasing, you attract. But don't confuse this with passivity. Quite the opposite. It's about living with so much passion and purpose that you no longer have time or space to worry about external approval. It's about occupying so much space with your own essence that rejection no longer has a place in your reality. Rejection still exists, of course, but its impact disappears because you no longer give it power. You no longer depend on it to define who you are. The void within, the illusion of external fulfillment. Now I propose an uncomfortable mental exercise. Imagine for a second that you achieve absolutely everything you want. Every dream fulfilled, every goal achieved, every desired person saying yes to you. What would happen next? Exactly. You'd feel an enormous void because you discover that nothing external can truly fill you. Do you know what this reveals? That true satisfaction doesn't come from outside. It's always been from within. What completes you is never in another person nor in another place, but in your own internal recognition. And then comes the great trap. If everything you seek is inside you, why do you keep waiting outside for others' approval? Because you're afraid of discovering that it all depends solely on you. It's easier to blame external rejection, It's simpler to point outside than to admit that you're the only one responsible for your fulfillment. But precisely there, in that fear, lies the key to your true strength. When you understand that no one will come to rescue you emotionally, you automatically stop waiting outside for what only you can give yourself. The ultimate secret, attracting by choice. So what is the ultimate secret behind the deep psychology of rejection? That only when you understand you don't need anything external to be complete do you start to authentically attract what you deserve. You don't attract because of need, you attract by choice. And that small shift in mentality radically transforms your life. You no longer go through life with open hands begging for acceptance. You move forward with confidence, independence, strength, because you know your worth will never depend on what someone else thinks of you. Finally, let me reveal something that almost no one says so clearly. Life rewards those who dare to live authentically without worrying about fitting in. The ultimate irony is that society chases and rewards those who actively ignore its rules. The most irresistible people are not the ones who seek attention. They're the ones who completely ignore the need for external validation. That is power. That is pure magnetism. Conclusion: the gift of rejection. So I leave you with this final, profound, and challenging reflection. Rejection is the sign that you are still pursuing what can only be found inside. Are you ready to take on the challenge? Do you dare to face the shadow, to embrace rejection as the greatest gift life can offer you? Because in the end, there's only one rejection you will never recover from, that of living an entire life without ever choosing yourself. The journey inward, unveiling your true self. Here's the powerful and profound closure that picks up exactly where you left off. And now that you've seen the truth stripped bare, here comes the most fascinating part of this whole journey. Rejection is only the beginning of a much deeper and more mysterious path. Because even though you've understood how your mind works and what the hidden game behind rejection is, there's still something crucial you have to discover, something no one else can reveal to you except yourself.